When there's trouble, you know who to call. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Because it's Thursday.
Hello, Watchtower Database, and welcome back to The Vanishing Point, the only bi-weekly YouTube show that dissects little chunks of the DCAU timeline to answer questions you probably never thought to ask. Just a couple weeks ago, the Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie released, and while I haven't had a chance to pick it up yet because of the fact that my bank account currently looks a little bit more atrocious than the love child of a Krang and one of the characters from Squidbillies, patreon.com/DCAU Watchtower, I figured that today would be the perfect chance to finally talk about the other time an animated Batman crossed over with the Ninja Turtles. Back in 2016, when we were just a little baby channel that hadn't even broken 2K subs yet, IDW Publishing began a crossover miniseries that brought together the worlds of the DC animated universe and the 2012 Ninja Turtles series on Nickelodeon. Written by Matthew Manning, who had worked in both of these worlds before through tie-in comics such as Justice League Adventures and multiple different tie-in books for the Ninja Turtles franchise, and illustrated by John Samariva, who had worked with Matthew before on a couple of the Ninja Turtles tie-in books. This book was an absolute love letter to both of these universes. We almost did a full Easter egg video on this comics run, but we figured you guys might be a little tired of the egg baby sound for now. So instead, I'm just gonna tell you a couple of my favorite Easter eggs from this run. In issue number 5, there was a 2-page spread of Michelangelo and Robin recreating the BTAS intro. In issue number 2, there was another page where the Bat family recreated the cover of the first Ninja Turtles comic. There was a hidden Mega Man in every issue of the series. And then who could forget this panel in issue number 4 with almost every villain from the original run of Batman the Animated Series. I'm sure some of you noticed that someone seems a little bit out of place here. So before you go writing your comments along the lines of, Condiment King is in Batman's fear hallucination, why does Batman think he's a threat? He's not an actual villain. Not canon! He actually showed back up in the Batman and Harley Quinn prequel comic, so there may be a little bit more to the Condiment King than what we've seen on screen. But that's a topic for a completely different video. Of course, this large array of villains does beg the question though, when does this book take place? The obvious short answer is sometime during Batman the Animated Series, but we've established before through other videos that that show takes place sometime between 1992 and 1997. So that's still a gap of like 5 years that we can narrow down. Is my mouth bleeding? While we haven't pinned down the origin of every character in that shot yet, there are a lot of them that we have. For example, Man-Bat first shows up in July of 1993. The Phantasm shows up sometime later that year. Ra's al Ghul shows up in late 1994. And then Mr. Freeze, being the latest of them all, is coming out of his cage and feeling just fine in August of 1995. This now consolidates our 5-year gap into a smaller 1.5-year gap to work in. But of course, as always, there are still more clues. Back in 2017, when Matthew Manning was on a panel to promote the book, he told fans this.
In my mind, I was like setting it after the original animated series ends, before the WB starts. Okay. So kind of in that little lull, that's where it kind of takes place a little bit.
Currently, the latest occurring episode of Batman the Animated Series by our research is Bullet for Bullock, which we've established before happened sometime between Christmas and New Year's Eve of 1996. So effectively, this statement from Manning shortens our gap so much further into the span of about a couple weeks. Now, if you're asking why I didn't just start the video off with that clip and send you guys on your way already, that's because while putting the comic after the entirety of BTAS was Manning's intent, there's just one small piece of continuity that keeps that from being possible. Or should I say multiple pieces of continuity that can come together into one big piece of continuity.
Madre de Dios, Clayface!
Madre de Dios is right, Renee. You see, past the villains that we see in Batman's hallucination, there are a couple other Arkham inmates that do show up throughout the run of this comic, including Two-Face, Joker, Harley, Scarecrow, Poison Ivy, the Mad Hatter, and of course, Clayface. You can't do that while I'm recording. For those of you who don't remember, Clayface's last appearance in Batman the Animated Series was in the episode Mudslide. Despite returning later in the new Batman Adventures, Justice League, and a couple of tie-in comics, this episode effectively served as the death of Matt Hagen. And while he did show back up in Holiday Nights, canonically speaking, his next appearance was in the episode Growing Pains, where Batman comes to find out that Clayface is still alive. As Clayface, or Annie, explains, "Buddy, you gotta stop doing that while I'm recording."
Clayface had washed out to sea. He couldn't hold his form anymore. He drifted near those pipes, and something in the chemicals made him whole again. But he wasn't strong yet, and he didn't know where he was.
So, the logical occurrence of things would have happened in the order of Batman TMNT Adventures, Mudslide, Growing Pains, and then Holiday Nights. It's really confusing when they all happen to come out of order like that, and maybe that's why the plot thread may have slipped Manning's mind when putting old Mudbutt into his story. Other than that, there aren't really any contradictions that keep this comic from happening after the rest of BTAS, as Manning suggests. Although, there may be some confusion when it comes to Poison Ivy's appearance in the series, since we see her leaving Gotham and seemingly for good in House and Garden. While the confusion is warranted, I won't be going too far into this point here, because just like with Clayface, we too are releasing story out of sequence, and we'll get to this sometime later, or earlier. Anyway, while we did see Ivy leave Gotham, Lockup gives us this information.
Next up on Gotham Insider, she's gorgeous, she's deadly, and she's back in town.
So she's totally back by this point, and it's not an issue, despite what I may have written on the DCAU Timeline Tumblr blog a few years ago. Hey, I can get things wrong sometimes too. Essentially, this all places the events of this comic run and Mudslide in between the events of Bullet for Bullock in late December of 1996 and January of 1997, when we see Dick leave the Bat family in the episode Old Wounds and the comic run Batman Adventures The Lost Years. Hopefully, this clears up some confusion about something I've said in the past that's gotten a lot of questions in the comment section. We've done the math before that shows that Dick graduates college in January of 1997 and leaves the Bat family very shortly after. And some of you have rightfully asked why I've concluded that that puts a cap for the majority of BTAS by the end of 1996 instead of allowing for some events to spill over into that January. Well, this is why. That space on the timeline has already been reserved by this comic as well as Mudslide. This still all leaves one question unanswered though. When does this happen on the Turtles timeline? That's right, if you thought I wasn't gonna answer that one,
congratulations, you played yourself.
To be completely honest though, I've never been as big of a fan of Ninja Turtles as I am with Batman, so I'm not as well versed in that continuity. However, Matthew Manning was nice enough to answer this question as well.
And then Turtles, I can't remember what season, we had to do it all before the last couple seasons because the Turtles spent a season in space. So we had to just set it all before then because things dramatically changed in the universe during that time.
For those of you who are fans of TMNT 2012, then you already know that the season that Manning is referring to is Season 4, which starts off with the Turtles being jettisoned into space. Yet the comic doesn't occur between Season 3 and 4 because Season 3 ended on a cliffhanger where the entire Earth was destroyed. Side note, what the hell kind of show is this? The entire Earth is destroyed and it still went on for another 2 seasons. First of all,
Now that's a lot of damage!
but how are you going to end on a happy note for a kid's show when the Earth is destroyed? I'm still just trying to wrap my mind around it. So for this comic to be before the last couple of seasons, it seems as though it takes place in between Season 2 and Season 3, which is further backed up by Ice Cream Kitty's appearance since that character first showed up in Season 2. I know my turtles. Don't I seem confident? Now, I assume that like most cartoons, it takes place around the time that it came out. So while the DCAU side of things in this story is set in the 90s, for the Turtles side, I would assume it's in the 2010s at some point. While this is kind of weird to think about, issue 6, which takes place in the new Batman Adventures era of the DCAU, is said by Matthew Manning to be set a couple of months after the events of the first 5 issues. I asked him about this when the book first came out, since we already know, due to Batman Adventures The Lost Years, that there's at least 2 years and some change between Batman shows. And he replied, essentially, since the book was published by IDW, his frame of reference for time was from the perspective of the Ninja Turtles more so than it was for Batman. So seemingly 2 years in DCAU time is only a couple of months in Turtle time. So if Batman Beyond's 40 years in the future, that'd be like maybe 40 months. So that'd be like 4 years. The TMNT guys, they could be like somewhere from 17 to 22 and meet Terry McGinnis. This isn't from the script. I'm just thinking about things. Now, this conversation was through my old Facebook account that I deleted when all of the concerns came up about privacy with the platform. And so I don't have screen grabs of those messages to put on screen like usual, but you guys know how thoroughly I try to research this stuff. So I'm hoping you can just take my word for it, but if not, whatever, that's your choice. We did do a few interviews with him in the past that you can find on the channel if you're interested in hearing us ask him other questions though. Now that this is all laid out, my question of the day for you is, what is your favorite Batman Ninja Turtles crossover so far? By this point, we've got 3 volumes of the original comic run, a movie, and then this comic. So there's really a lot to work with here. And while we're at it, if you could cross over any version of Batman with any version of the Ninja Turtles, which 2 would you pick? Personally, I feel like maybe the 2003 Turtles with Batman the Brave and the Bold would be a lot of fun, just because of how different their worlds are. One's a bit more edgy, one's a little bit more camp, and I feel like there'd be a lot of interesting personality conflicts going on there. Once again though, I just want to hear what you guys have to say about it. So as always, leave your answers down under in the Australia section. Before I go though, I want to thank all of these lovely people for supporting us this month on Patreon. It really means a lot to us. And if you want to end up seeing your name on the list, you can head over to patreon.com/DCAU Watchtower and we'll get it on there for as low as $1 pledge per month. While you're over there though, you can check out other perks that we've got available, such as voting for upcoming episodes, live stream hangouts, and even some merch. As always though, I've been Mattie Washburn, this has been The Vanishing Point, and we'll continue to stay those things so long as you continue to stay you. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. That way you're gonna be able to see me in 2 weeks. If you don't wanna do that, that's fine too. And I'll see you when I see you. I love you guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you, well, like I just said, in 2 weeks. You know the drill, it's 2 weeks. Or if you're in a different universe, maybe a couple months.